Quick question. Can your supervisors communicate, solve conflicts, lead with confidence? Anyone promoted from operations to management will tell you that the soft skills are the hard skills. That's why we created a program for technically minded folks to learn the right tools for today's leadership challenges. Tools like reading employee emotions, setting workplace goals, and communicating with a diverse workforce. Hungry for more? Get the details at shiftworkplace.co/supervisory leadership training. That's shiftworkplace.co/supervisory leadership training. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I would like to introduce to you someone who I admire very much, a personal friend of mine, Rachel Gour. Rachel is a salon owner, hairstylist, and a salon owner educator. She's an entrepreneur and a visionary who has been thinking about things way in advance of when they became popular. She started to think about how products were affecting your hair and your skin, and your body and your health many years before people were actually introducing those products into the market. And she was one of the first people to start using them. Rachel is a parent, a foster parent, and a daughter. She is a support and advocate for women in choice and women in growth, and has had quite a number of jobs that helped her to plan events and grant wishes to people. She's planned events for the government children's services and has worked with high-risk teen girls to get them off the streets. So welcome, Rachel. So happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, my friend Marie. That was a beautiful introduction.
Thank you. It was all coming out of the things that you have done in your life, and there's much more to find out about. So that was the formal bio, and I'm wondering if you can tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Well, first and foremost, I'm a parent to two amazing men that have grown up to be very successful in all that they've gone after. But also my passion has always been women and beauty and bringing women to the best that they can be, even if it's just for 5 minutes in my chair or an hour. And I've just dabbled in, fun things like doing events and making sure that life is fun.
Yeah, I came to meet you a number of years back when I came for a hair appointment, and the person I was supposed to see wasn't there. And so luckily I met you. And you did a lot of really interesting things that I had never experienced with any stylist in the past. And I felt that you were truly there for me as a person. And I suspect that that's probably the way you approach everything. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so. I meet women like you in the salon every day, and I've only worked, to be honest, 3 times in 3 salons for someone else. The rest has been for myself. And even in salons that I worked for in the 33 years that I've done hair, it's still your own business. It's still you building your own brand and becoming who you are and what you are. And that time, I really was working with women that were in my age group where, gray is the issue. Mm-hmm. We've aged, we've earned, we've deserved these grays.
Well, I was complaining to a trainer. I keep looking for a new trainer for personal fitness. And I keep talking to one young trainer after another. And I ask them, what do you know about working with the aging body? And they're all dumbfounded. They just don't know what to say. And the thing is that the population is getting older and older. And we have the demographic of people who are older is so large now that really needs to be a target market for many industries.
Right. And so funny, that was sort of how I was basing my next few years, was working with women in gray and how we're going to work with this. And then COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, I just had to sit back comfortably and go, I know how to handle this. Everybody that's going to grow out their hair and everyone that's going to have or colored their hair by themselves, or, I was already on that curve. And so I am grateful that I'm always one step ahead.
You really are one step ahead. And even also with, when people can't get out, how do they get their products that they need for their hair? So then you set up a delivery service. You're always thinking, before people were doing Facebook organically or Facebook ads, you already were setting that up to make sure that it was local and targeted and you were getting results from it. So I really see you as one of the visionaries in the industry.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I want to stay young, and the only way that I can stay young is stay current.
That's quotable. The way to stay young is to stay current, for sure. That's what it is.
And I worked for 5 years. I did a stint where I came back from behind the chair and did education and sales. And I say this all the time, is every Monday morning there's a new product. So you better be current.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. We'd have a sales meeting every Monday morning and there would be something new. So in this industry, it's changing every Monday morning.
Mm-hmm. It's practically like software development. Same. So can you share a couple of incidents from your childhood that you think made you into the person you are today?
Yes. I'll start by saying I was handpicked into a family who was hardworking, educational, and humble. My mother was from England and my father was French Canadian, and they met on the boat. We often say it's like the Titanic, but it didn't sink. But they had struck a love for each other on this boat. And when they both landed in Edmonton after my dad being on vacation and my mother moving here from England, they kept it going and married and had one child, adopted two, and then had another child. So from a very young age, I was told that I was adopted and embraced it and loved it and was told always that I was handpicked. From the family that I was handpicked from, I was given gratefully and wonderfully, I've been able to meet my family that I'm from. They gave me the passion, the humor, and acceptance of other people. And so that really has shaped me to be very accepting of many people. Also, the family that I was handpicked into, which I love dearly, was, I guess, one step ahead too. My dad was in education and he wanted us to flourish. So he moved us out to an acreage next to the reserve where he was the principal for many of the students at the time. And then they built a school on the reserve. My dad still stayed in the city and worked at his school, but my mother became the librarian at the school that I went to on the reserve. And so my upbringing was on a native Indian reserve just outside of Edmonton.
Which is very unusual for someone who is white. And your parents made a conscious decision to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did. There was a couple of us families that moved out. And as we moved out to the acreage, we helped build their family's home. And then they helped us build our family's home. And my dad, he had all these teachers that worked in his school. And before they were teachers, they had trades. And so he would have like, bring out your trailer and stay for the weekend. And the electrician would come, bring his family. And I would get to play with all these kids while they built this house. And we lived like hippies. And our garden was the one that fed everybody. And we'd go back and forth to this other acreage. And it was really such a delightful childhood. Really, we had fun. There's that book, Free to Be You and Me, which has always been our favorite in our family. And it was just so good. And that's exactly what it was. We were free to be you and me.
Well, that was an unusual childhood that gave you some insights into the world that most children don't have, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a beautiful time. We really just ran the road and we were the kids that were able to come home, just get home before it's dark. I remember my dad saying that regularly.
So from the groups that you were born into, because you were born into actually quite a few groups from what you just said to me now, from those groups that you were born into, what would you say has most influenced your sense of culture and your sense of self?
So definitely my school years have really influenced who I am and my home life for sure too. So with that same family unit, we also worked with this other family and we had many refugees that came and lived with us. We had built big homes, so we had extra bedrooms and extra rooms, and there was always extra work to do on these acreages. My dad's vision for his acreage that we grew up on was to have no pesticides. This is now in the 70s, so to think this through back then, that was a big deal. So,
it really was, for sure.
Yeah, so we used no pesticides. My dad grew potatoes to, clean out the gardens from the farmer that used to have it. We grew potatoes first, and then we moved into other pieces, and we had large gardens. And so my parents were off all summer, unlike other families where they were left to be their own. We were off the same time as our parents always. So at the time, of course, I hated it. My parents were always home when I was home. Although my dad had a schedule for us. Every summer, all summer long, we would work till noon. So we'd get up in the morning and then he would let us shut down about 11:30 where we would just help in the gardens by weeding. And while we were weeding, he was telling us stories and talking to us. And, there was 4 of us, 3 boys and me. And so I was always being tormented or I was tormenting, depending. So it was oftentimes running through the gardens and over top of things that were growing, getting chased by bugs and bees and whatever is there on the acreage. And so it was really a beautiful upbringing that way. And then we were free to be who we wanted to in the afternoons and the evenings and run the road and ride our bikes and meet with the other kids in the neighborhood. But we grew these community gardens, it felt like, to make sure that we were fed all summer and all winter. And then the other family, they would share with us too. Great things that we would both grow. So it was very communal-like living.
And then you also had refugees that stayed with you from Latin America.
Yeah, they would come from wherever. It's funny now that we think about it, none of us really remember who these people are and where they've gone to. And they came and they stayed and they cut grass and they helped us weed and they would teach us about who they were. My parents also belonged to the Catholic Church, but also wanted us to recognize other religions. So we were celebrating the Jewish religion. We would do Passover. We would stay up all night. We would bake bread and do egg hunt and painting and have these families of church people that would come over and we would embrace whatever it is that our parents had talked about and wanted us to learn. So it was really fun. It was a fun childhood.
And then you also said that school that you went to was a big influence. That was the school on the First Nations community that you were next to?
Yes. So then I went to school. Grade 1, 2, and 3, I was at another school. And then they opened it up in grade 4. We started in this school that was new to all the world, to be honest. It happened only once, and it was 25 years that it made it. And it was the county around the reserve built the school onto the reserve so that the non-native children could go to school on reserve. And then the reserve students could feel like they had a school at home. And this was very clearly after residential school had taken place. So it was watched. It was hand-picked teachers with very specific needs and wants in their careers. Because my mother worked in the school, I got to know many of the teachers very personal. They became our friends throughout my life. My children grew up with some of these teachers that I had as their friends in their life too. And it was great. It was a beautiful school because we learned nothing about color, but just that we were children.
Yeah, you got a chance to get to know each other and develop bonds of friendship as children would normally do if they wouldn't have been segregated into different places where they wouldn't interact. So you got to experience this natural friendship and just play together with other kids in a way that was so much more integrated than what many people experienced at that time.
Yes, and we embraced their culture in as many ways as we could in the 80s, so late 70s and early 80s, where some of their culture hadn't been brought back yet.
Because it was so badly oppressed and forbidden.
For sure. And so some of my best and greatest relationships have come out of going to that school. And I can speak for many that we do have lifelong friends from that community. My first job was there, my first boyfriend, my first party. My first life experience was out on a reserve, and it was my best experience.
That's wonderful. So as you grew up, then you chose the hair and skin industry, and you traveled quite a bit. And if I remember correctly, you also have adopted and fostered. I mean, you've chosen quite a number of different people to belong to their lives and for them to belong to your lives. So what stands out for you as things that you might have adopted into how you see the world?
Well, I have a story that I share, and it's a tough one because when I became a teenager and a young adult and was sort of roaming around trying to find myself, I remember the day when I told my dad I was going to become a hairdresser, and he was like, "Oh, finally, I wanted you to figure this out." And I guess he knew I was going to be a hairdresser long before I was going to be one. And I went into it thinking, and I have to say this, like many other hairdressers, this will be easy.
Everything always looks easy from the outside, doesn't it?
Yes, until you take that first class and they talk about lighting and color and formulas and, that science and math I should have probably paid a little more attention to came up and was needed. And I was like, this isn't going to be as easy as I thought. One thing that did work in my favor was that I loved people and I worked with people. And I loved the variety of people and culturally all the places that I had been already. up till I was 20 and learned many different things about people. And I loved that. I was fairly young when I had my first son, and I had a great relationship, and we ended up pregnant. And my dad had taken me for lunch when he found out, and he said, I need to talk to you about something. And at this time, I was going through life just loving it and going, well, I'm going to have a baby. This is going to be great. My dad had sat me down to say, some people are not going to love your baby. And I was like, what are you talking about? And there I was, a 20-year-old, being told for the first time in my life about racism. My dad and my mom raised us to not see color. And that was a very life-changing moment for me because I had no idea that I was having a mixed child and it was going to be a problem. I was embracing a son that I really wanted to have and a baby that was going to be so cute, to be honest.
Well, and mixed race children are superbly cute.
Absolutely. Let's just say it. So I was embracing this, and that was the first time I had heard it, and the first time that I had to think about it, and the first time that I had to think back to my childhood and go, oh, right, those people did live differently than I did, but I didn't care. They still loved me, and I loved them, and we were still friends, and we still did things, and I still did normal teenage things like, I said I was going here and went over there and got caught and, did all those things. And they did the same things. They were just children doing the same things. I had to look at that and go, what? Wow. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the 80s, which I thought we were past all that.
It's the same thing said until the Me Too movement. People kept saying, oh, really? Do women actually experience any harassment anymore? And then when the whole Me Too movement came out and 1 in 3 women are harassed or raped, and people go, oh, how come I didn't see that? And when it's not your experience is positive. We all see the world through our own eyes.
Yeah. And these people had embraced me into their lives, into their families, to their homes, or they came into our homes and they celebrated their culture with us, which I thought made me a richer individual because I knew this. And at the time, really, I just thought it was the normal. So did we eat meat and potatoes all the time? No, we ate all different kinds of food all the time as a family. And growing up with my own children, I didn't even just keep it to them eating the Western food. We would go here, we'd go there. We're going to try this. We're going to try that. And that's just the food portion of it. But I also wanted my children to have the same experiences that I did. So how was I going to integrate these cultural things that I had learned in my own family? And this was the first time I had thought about it. It was like, this isn't the norm that I learned how to enter a teepee, sit around a fire, have a bannock burger or make bannock. My mother was a great bannock maker and she was from England. And I was confused at this time. Now what am I going to do? Now my son is now part Black. And what am I going to do in my community to raise him to understand his culture? So I just embraced it and, always celebrated it and always brought it into our home and made sure that it was always around for him.
Yeah. So it sounds to me from what you're saying that you really consciously chose to seek out difference because that's also how you were raised and you found it easy to bridge.
Yeah. I feel the diversity of our country, my mom and dad really did embrace. So us Canadians who have always been known for bringing in, people and letting them come to our country, that's how my parents raised us. That's how my parents wanted us to believe. And so I did the same with my own children. I also do the same in my own life. So last year, even though during COVID, we had an outside end of Ramadan party I was invited to, and it was outside and we stood, 6 feet apart, but we still celebrated with our friends that had Ramadan. And my eclectic group of friends today are what I grow and thrive from of their life experience. And I want them to always feel like they don't have to think that they are poorly thought of in my presence. And I think that that's my biggest takeaway from my life. And what my parents wanted me to learn was that acceptance always. You are in what you are loved, you are here, you are now. You're important.
And although that may be the Canadian stereotype, that certainly hasn't been the way it's been lived. But it's like your family has made a conscious choice to live it that way and to continue to grow and learn as you went through, as you got to know people at a deeper and deeper level.
Mm-hmm. And it's just been so important to me, I think, with my closest, dearest friends that are culturally different than I was raised. Although now I don't even know, because I feel like I was raised more traditionally on a reserve than I was in any other aspect. I want them to know that it's always acceptable in my home and in our relationship. So if they say I can't make it because, I would never question.
Mm-hmm.
I would never not. If they have lost a loved one and I have to do something that culturally will make them feel, I would do that. If culturally they want to get their hair cut and take their hair with them, I will absolutely honor that. If culturally they want to wear a hijab and be in a private place, I will culturally be aware of that.
That's really lovely. It gives a sense of safety, that people will feel safe with you.
Yes. And I think that that's exactly what my parents wanted us to do and become, is to make everybody feel safe in there. And honestly, I think my parents were just travelers and loved people different ways. And that as children, they wanted us to learn that too, that there wasn't just a one way.
Right. So people are born with a temperament, and then their personality is something they add on as they grow and experience new things. And what would you say is the temperament that people go, yeah, that's Rachel. She's been like that since she was little.
So as I've heard in other podcasts before, will we go back to the report card that says, Rachel talks too much in class? And I hear that time and time again. And I think, okay, well, I'm not alone now. I feel really good about that. I remember my brother saying, you're going to make a really good parent one day. And so that was like, was I controlling? But also sales has been my first love. I always thought like I would stay in sales and be in sales for the rest of my life. And hairdressing is sales. I mean, you're selling yourself as your brand every day. But outgoing and lively and controversial and passionate and loving and humorous, I think, are all things that I can say about myself.
I'm really appreciating that you're able to name that beautiful list, because frequently when I ask that question, I find that podcast guests have a lot of difficulty identifying sometimes even one thing that they would say is their temperament. But you have a really, really nice rounded list that shows that you have a lot of self-awareness about who you are.
Well, when you're told, I just heard this the other day or not too long ago, and it was, the wild one's here. And I was like, I've had this a couple times, like, oh, Rachel's here. And it'll be at a party or an event or something. And I'm like, oh, how do people really see me? And so I've spun a positive note on that people want to see me there rather than take that as a negative, like, oh, Rachel's here.
You wouldn't keep being invited if it wasn't a positive, I think. Exactly.
And I think it's funny because it was our last outing last year before COVID hit. It was the weekend before everything got shut down. And there was a group of our friends getting together, and we all met, and there was two new ones from the group, and they both said, oh, Rachel, we've heard so much about you.
It's always scary when people say that, isn't it? What did you hear exactly?
And they said that I would keep it lively and we would have fun. And so then I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I'm aware that is who I am.
Yeah, it's great. Now, you did mention already what I'm going to ask you a question about next. When you talked about your dad sitting you down and saying, you're going to have a mixed race child and that child may not be loved by everyone. How are you going to deal with that when that happens? And that, I think, would be a moment of culture shock, if I interpret it correctly, when you think that what you thought was normal is not normal for other people. So can you think of another time in your life when it just hit you that what you considered to be the norm was not a norm? It was just specific to your experience.
So I think that my hairdressing career has taught me a lot about women, and women in life have stopped me in my tracks quite a few times. I say now, later in life, now that I've been doing hair for quite a while, I can sort of see a pattern of a woman who's about to leave a situation, be it her job, her family, her life, something that's causing her lots of grief. And right before that, or during or after, she will cut her hair.
That's really interesting. After my experience of going to Haiti after the earthquake, the first thing I did when I came back was just cut it all off. It was really difficult to see what people were living in and that I could leave and they couldn't. It just struck me. And I wanted the hair gone, so that's exactly what I did.
Yeah. And it's funny because I found the quote later in life, and it was from Coco Chanel. And she said, a woman that is about to make a change will cut her hair. Mm-hmm. Similar to that. And that is so true.
She was another visionary, wasn't she?
Yes. I've watched the movie about 100 times.
Yeah.
I feel like I think a lot like her in that way. And I also understood it. I understood it so well when I had a woman that has left her husband or left a situation that has hurt her and she sees the power in herself. And the reason that I keep staying doing hair, I guess, or why it keeps me engaged and every day is new and exciting, is that somebody comes to me 2 months after they've shared something with me, and I get to find out more of how they've grown, how they've decided and made decisions and gone, you know what, I left her the last time, and you know what, I did exactly what we talked about. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Or the times when people say, you know what, I don't know, I don't even know what I want. And I listen to them. And I often talk about that I'm more of a transformational leader, if they're going to give me labels, in that I work with my client, like you, Marie, when I say to you, are you really wanting to do this every 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Just coloring your hair. I don't know how many secrets you want me to give up, but when Marie was ready for change, I was there for her. But while we were doing this change, I had to sort of talk you through it, right? Like I had to say, this is what I'm going to do, but this is how it's going to. So we have to work together. So I have to show you my vision and you have to show me your vision. And then we need to work together to get there.
Rather than it being a culture shock, because you have experienced many different cultures in their travels and you're working around the world, it's almost like you're just looking for another experience to connect with people and get to that next level and accompany them in their life journey. And that you're starting to recognize patterns. So I think the shock would wear off in the sense that you're starting to see the patterns across cultures of what women will do at different moments in their lives. Did I get that right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is about getting to know different. If you don't open yourself up to seeing different cultures in different ways, at the end of the day, we're still women, we're still men, we're still children. And so we need to be treated with that vision that my parents had for me.
That we're human beings. We're human beings first.
And we're all one. And that we all deserve. The one thing that I can take away from my life is that I've never been able to understand how we don't love and like other people. I've never understood that. When you're in my chair and your demographic says that you have no money to I have been treated poorly, it's all exactly the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it does.
So ethically, what I wanted to do in my business was to always make sure that women could afford to feel beautiful, and be it just a haircut, which could be life-changing.
It sets you up for success.
Yeah, and the products that you use and how you use them and what feels right. It goes back to that whole thing about, again, my father teaching us about no pesticides. And we soon learned about me that I ended up having a lot of allergies because I wasn't exposed to all of those things. And the other lady that lived very similar to the way we did, she grew up and she had some similar allergies to products that I did, like foods and stuff. And so we attribute it both to not being exposed to the pesticides and the harsh chemicals that they used in the 70s and 80s that my father tried to keep us away from. And it was interesting. So that has framed, again, going into the hair industry, how I had to move into a really healthy, and I didn't want to get out. And I knew that there was a way that we could stay in this and be healthy.
Yeah, I'd like to just go back to something that you said, where you said you accompany people in their journey. And actually, hair is very close to people's identity. And I had all these preconceived ideas of how adaptable I would be when I was younger. And one of the main things that hit me was when I went to Japan and I had a complete aversion to rice, which I never expected I would have, having grown up with it and having grown up with Japanese food because my dad's best friend was a Japanese food store owner. So all of that stuff, it really shocked me with how much I really was unaware of the influences around me and my own processes. And I always said the same thing about hair. I went, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you color it or cut it or if it's a bad haircut because, just shave it off and it starts again, it'll grow, right? But then when I reached that point in my life where, I turned gray gray when I was 29 with my youngest daughter, with all her almost dying 6 times. It was a completely different feeling. It was like I've been not letting myself be gray, because what 29-year-old wants to be gray for many years. And then afterwards thinking, if I have to transition out of this, people are going to look at me and think I'm ugly. And I had never had that thought in my life. I never thought I'd be ugly or pretty. I just thought I was just there. And I realized that this is affecting whether I like it or not. I'm affected by everything that has to do with body image and self-esteem that's in the media that every other woman is. And it really came home to me when you talked me through the process of what this was going to look like and showed me pictures of what it could look like and made me feel safe with the process. And I never thought I'd even think that this would be such a big deal. And yet it was a big deal for me.
And it is a huge deal because we attribute gray hair to old people.
Yeah.
When really it can be a young person's issue.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I mean, thank goodness the gray toner and the gray is in, even before the whole COVID, and gray has really come out even more now, but a more natural gray. When previous to this, it was more of a gray, but we were given the tools in the industry. We saw it coming, where the baby boomers were going to come to an age where they were going to be like, you know what, I'm done. I'm done to the slave, to the color. I can't do this anymore. I can't afford it. Every 3 weeks I have a root of white. Mm-hmm. Everybody's my gray anyways. And that is the vision that I've always been able to help people through. Marie, you're hiding what? The gray line? Everybody's already seeing the gray. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how do you say that tactfully and having you feel beautiful about it? Mm-hmm. How do I say to you, when I see your gray, and I know today that people compliment you on your white hair every day because you were gifted the most beautiful white hair. And not everybody gets that, but I will take the most, I don't even want to say negative Nancy, to not believe, to be a believer that she can embrace her gray and it will be okay.
Mm-hmm. It's really important because this whole process of aging is such an issue in our society right now, where we have a negation of death constantly. And aging is a reminder that we're all going to die at some point, whether we like it or not. So I think it really is the graying and the aging reminds us that we are in part an existential world. We're going to have to make peace with some of these big questions. But we're getting to the end of the interview. And you know, when people come to you, they might make a proposition like, for example, this one woman that you worked with who was disfigured and did a whole documentary on her experience and how that affected her sense of self as a woman. You know, that someone had to come to you and make that proposal, and somebody will also come to you and say, you know, can I trust you to cut my hair? What do you say to them, or how do you make them feel that? I guess what I'm trying to say is, what's the best way to work with you? What would make it a great experience to work with Rachel because they're working with you in the fullness of who you are?
So I take the time with my clients to, first of all, hear their grievances, which they will come out first with always. So my question is always to you and many people, so what is it you don't like about your hair? Then I can see what page they're on. And then what is it you love about your hair? When was your best haircut? When was your best style? When was your best look? When did you feel the best? And you can sort of build from there. Their negatives, I don't like this. I have a cowlick. My hair goes here. It goes there. My husband doesn't like long hair. I like short. You know, all these things come up. They come up and they're negatives. I want to say my third job, I was working in portrait sales. Hardest thing is to sell somebody themselves. Back in the 80s. And I remember that exact quote. Going into a room and selling them a whole wall of themselves is a harder job than anything in themselves. I took that into hairdressing and I have sworn by this. I have a client, a friend, a dear woman that I work with and who's done really well in life. And she was 75% burnt of her body. She has a balding spot on the back of her head. And we work around those things. And at the end of the day, she has the most beautiful blonde hair. Everybody has something to celebrate. Right. Everybody has something beautiful in them, on them, with them.
You know, it sounds like the best way to work with you is for people to just feel free to say who they are and be honest.
Yeah, and that's where I say, you tell me who you are, I will tell you who I am, and we will work together. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the best way to lead in your business, is to make sure that you hear them, you see them, and you understand them. And they see and hear and understand you.
Right. Is there anything that you'd like to promote?
I feel in our industry, loyalty is being lost. And I'm sad about that. And I think that the longer that you're loyal with your stylist and your beauty consultant in many aspects. There's other people that do other things for us. I think the longer, it's like a relationship. The more you give to it, the more you're going to get from it. Mm-hmm. If you continue to hop around and go here, there, and everywhere, the best parts of you will be lost.
That's a really lovely thought.
Yeah, it's been a hard one for me because loyalty, I take it personally, even though, and sometimes you just need a change, but just let me know it's time for a change. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I will work harder. And sometimes I get complacent, but this industry is ever changing and there's always something new. There's something that I want to try. I love when a client books and I say to them, oh, guess what? I'm getting a new bleach, or I can't wait for you to come in because I've learned a new technique. And they're like, really? Okay, cool. Let me see it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So educating yourself and being in the now is the most important, but also loyalty to me is, I think, we're missing. And I think that it's the first time I've seen it be so hard. And it's because there's so many salons and so many people. I think that if you would do better, everyone would do better if you had some loyalty.
That's a really lovely thing to end on. And we'll put any information that you have for links so people can get in touch with you into the show notes. And before we close, is there anything you'd like to say as a final word?
That we are all one and we are all deserving of beauty and light in this world. And honestly, I just can't say it enough that I am so grateful for the upbringing that I had and the experiences that I was able to experience and to go forward and to live and to love everyone for who they are.
Thank you, Rachel. It has really been an honor to interview you.
Absolutely, Marie. One of my favorite clients. Don't tell anyone.
All right. Well, just keep it a secret. Rachel Gour, hairstylist and beauty business visionary, had the unusual childhood experience of being brought up next to a First Nations community where both her parents taught and where she went to school. From racing through gardens as a child to helping women transition their hair into graceful gray, she has spent her life being attentive to process, spreading kindness and joy, and experiencing deep connection with everyone who crosses her path. Rachel's life reminds me of Audrey Hepburn's words, "For beautiful eyes, look for the good in others. For beautiful lips, speak only words of kindness. And for poise, walk with the knowledge that you are never alone." I hope you enjoyed this interview with Rachel Gour and that you will take the time to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn on my profile, Marie Gervais, or on Google My Business at Shift Management. Thank you for listening, and may culture and leadership connections continue to guide and inspire your day. This podcast would not be possible without the expertise of our Culture and Leadership Connections production team. A big thank you and shout out to Mike Kurlander for audio production and editing, to Malvika Kathpal for the show notes, Bernadette Guadiz for online web and social media management and promotions, Celine Bayogo for design, and Kirsten Hoyer for website and branding. Thank you so much. Are you a big Culture and Leadership Connections podcast fan? Our Patreon platform is the most versatile way to hear podcast episodes, cross-cutting theme discussions, and watch VIP podcast guest videos. You can download the app to your phone and listen wherever you are. Check out the subscription levels for perks that appeal to you. Feel good about helping us cover podcast production costs while enhancing your listening experience at the same time. Go to patreon.com/culture and leadership connections. That's spelled patreon.com/culture and leadership connections.